Welcome to Just Minding My Business Radio, where we are moving at the speed of God, learning what we didn't know we didn't know. I'm your host, Ida Crawford, so grab a pen and paper and get ready for information that you can use. Welcome to another episode of JMMB Radio, short for Just Minding My Business Radio. I hope you had an amazing day and looking forward to sharing this awesome guest that we have tonight. And I'm your host, Ida Crawford.
And I'm your co-host, Ruth Haskins. So tonight, we welcome to the mic Sid McNary. He is a previous football coach at Northern Illinois University with a major in movement and sports science from Purdue University and a master's degree in sports administration from Eastern Illinois University. Sid's path to helping others find their walk to healing and inspiring others was more or less destined. Sid credits his parents with inspiring him to move forward and touch so many lives. Growing up with two successful parents and yogis in their own right, his mother and father's lifestyle practices instilled a foundation from which Sid could grow freely and become a masterful yogi. He has 3 books to his credit. He is the author of Yoga and Life Empowerment, Empowerment and Beyond, which was his first book, and then another book, The Warrior Within, published in 2017. We welcome Sid McNary to the mic at Just Minding My Business Radio. Hi, Sid.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We have a lot of questions for you. We know that many of our listening audiences may or may not practice yoga. I'm one of the ones who does not. So we'd like to talk to you first, which is usually Ida's question, about how you really started into your practice and putting yoga and sports and all of this together. How did it all come together?
Well, for me, yoga really began just with something very simple of a seated meditation. And that started when I was 8 years old and had a soccer coach that would have us meditate before our games. So it was way ahead of he was way ahead of the times back then. And that carried with me. I mean, I grew up with coaches that would have us meditate before games, whether it was my soccer coach at an early age of 8 on through to playing over in England to my high school football coach. And so it carried with me that way. And then because it meant so much to me in my youth and in my own playing career, when I got to become a college football coach, I began to use meditation and yoga to help my players. So it stayed with me for a long time. I started really doing the physical asana practice where you're moving through different poses. I started doing that in 1996 to heal my own body. And as my body began to shift, I started to see that there were other benefits that I could access. As I learned to breathe, I was able to heal my asthma. And as all those things healed within me, when I got much older, I started really going into a much deeper practice, and it evolved to going to sitting on the mountains as a Native American, spending 10 days in silence and doing all these different things that ultimately have really led me to where I am today, and being able to use the energy that flows through me to help other people get better, be better, and stay better, to find their own personal healing from anything that they're moving through in their life.
Okay. Sid, could you explain, again, thank you for that. Could you explain briefly what yoga is, what the basic tenet of yoga is?
Well, yoga in the States, we tend to think that yoga is postures, moving your body from one place to the next. When really the Yoga Sutras were written before Christ. by a guy named Patanjali. And in the Yoga Sutras, that physical part of yoga, of moving our bodies, is a very small part of yoga. Yoga goes from meditation, karmic yoga, which is being of service to others, bhakti yoga, which is devotional, which is something we practice a lot in this country, whether it's Judaism, whether it's Christianity, Hinduism, Muslim belief, whatever that is. When you are devoting yourself to the presence of God, you are practicing yoga. And the actual meaning of yoga is to yoke, creating a union from your highest self to your earth self, the operating ego, and removing all the illusion to accessing that. So we really don't even realize how much we've practiced yoga in a sense. And because the word, at least when I started, was so new to the world of, at least in America, people had a lot of fear around yoga, thinking it was a religion or you were worshiping something other than God as we know it, and that's not the case at all. Yoga is a different way of having an operating system to move through your life, to gain access to something that's innate for all of us.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ida.
I noticed in your bio you talked about the health benefits, such as the disappearance of your asthma. I just so happened recently, my husband has COPD, and one of the things that the doctor talked about was him doing yoga. And can you elaborate a little bit on the health benefits?
Well, there's a lot of health benefits. And what I'd say from my own personal experience is the more I align to being truly aligned within my own body. Jesus talked about the stream of wellness running through a person. And the more I can align my physical body, the more my alignment of my spirit, my mental health, everything comes into alignment with my physical as I shift in that way. And so for me, that's where it's shown up, is, whether it was healing my fused ankle that's no longer fused, that I have more range of motion than I do in the ankle that never had surgery, whether it's aligning my shoulders back in their proper alignment, my shoulders stacking over my hips, so on and so forth. All of that begins to create a different flow of the energy moving through my body. And if the energy moves through your body freely, that's healthy. So that's where the physical shifts really have shown up for me, is just creating that level of alignment. In that level of alignment, what took place for me as I learned how to do different things, legs up a wall, and then working on abdominal breathing that expanded into my thoracic cavity of my chest and moved up through my body, that allowed me to actually become more functioning in my body. So at least for me with my asthma, my breath was probably working, I know they said it, but they told me that by the time I was 35, I would only have 25% of my breathing capacity. And I'm well surpassed that. They said I would walk around with an oxygen tank. This was what I was told when I was 19. And so I knew early on that wasn't a way that I wanted to live my life. And so I began to shift many things, and not just through my physical body, but I also had to learn how to move differently with the stresses of coaching football. I had to learn how to operate in my life differently with the relationships I've had. I had to learn how to move through life with diminishing the stress in my body, the stress in my mind, that allowed me to come into a place of being healed for myself. And then once that energy began to move through me, that's really what happens when I work with people. Is they aren't, many people aren't even aware that the tuning fork that I am and that I've reached into and discovered through all the different processes through my life is how someone who comes into the frequency of being with me, they become in that alignment as a tuning fork as well. You know, it's like if you take two tuning forks and you hit one and it tunes to a frequency, you hold the other one close to it or even really far away if nothing's in between them, they begin to vibrate at the same highest frequency that either one has. And so that's kind of how I look at it and explain it for people. It's like we're all radios and we dial into a frequency. If my frequency is higher and stronger than another frequency, the other radio will meet that frequency. And so if I can hold a state of peace in a way that brings my body ease, when I go into an environment and speak or into an environment where there's chaos, if I can hold the peace, other radios or people will meet in that same frequency.
Wow. Okay.
That is powerful. That is really powerful.
That's something that we hear more and more of if we're happening to be on that same frequency, so to speak. I think what I really want to ask you is about, there are a couple of things here. One is more about energy. Most people don't even recognize, we consider our energy when we wake up, how do we feel? We consider our energy whether we feel like running or whether we absolutely cannot run. What is a proper view of our energy? And you kind of hit on it, but if you could just elaborate a little bit, because energy is very important, and the energy that we have in ourselves definitely affects other people. Their energy can definitely affect us. How do we get that balance so that we hold our own energy and keep it at a good level? Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. And I'd first, in our languaging of how we use the energy that moves around, everything is energy. And, you know, if you put anything that we think is solid under a microscope, we will see that the cells or the atoms that are moving within that object are vibrating and moving. They're all moving. So the only reason they actually become more soluble is because of how they're moving with each other. And so being that it's all in movement, it's all a frequency that it's taking place, then from my view, when it comes to looking at energy, we really have to look at how we are interacting with something that is always there. And that begins to determine how it's going to show up for us. In the Bible, it talks about if two or more agree, so it shall be. So now, if I agree that a chair is a chair and you agree the chair is the chair, and more people agree that the chair is the chair, it becomes a chair. But it could actually be a pot holder. But only through our agreements we have determined what it is. And so now when we wake up in the morning and we get a short amount of sleep, more than two people have already agreed in the world that we really need 8 hours sleep. And I'm here to tell you I don't sleep 8 hours a night. But yet I wake up ready to go. I go to sleep later than most. And so I've already determined what that is for me. So now I can interact with my thoughts of it. Many people, I've taught many classes where people come up and say, wow, you really pushed us today. And I said, that's interesting. I was really tired. My interaction with that vibration or with that energy of tired says I turn on more because that's my belief. And so it's all based on beliefs of how we are interacting with the energy or interacting with the sensation or interacting with a statement from a doctor. It's all based on beliefs on what comes next.
That is, I hope our listening audience got that, because if I'm hearing you correctly, we are often given messages, and because everybody else is agreeing that this is thus and so, we assume that it must be thus and so, and therefore we can be impacted by that general belief system that's not necessarily our own. We've just adopted it. And sometimes adopting some of those beliefs is not in our best interest.
Yes, 100%. A guy I was interacting with years ago, he said, people are continually operating with a 10,000-year-old mind. And the way he explained it was, if you take a caveman back in the caveman times, he would go find a honeycomb and would gorge and gorge and gorge the honey in order to build fat storage for the winter. We still operate with that 10,000-year-old mind that we go to a store and we want to grab candy bars and feed on sugar from the 10,000-year-old mind that we don't have to worry about trying to find a honeycomb. And so if we can shift the old operating system, then we'll find that our interaction with different energies shifts. And that's all it really, we have to start living into a new story.
Okay. This is going deep, and I'm loving it. And because it is a deep topic. And that's why I asked you what yoga is, because many people have the incorrect impression. Like you said, in the United States, it's all about postures and whatnot. But here we're talking about the essence of being human and the fact that we really don't know what it is to be human. Sometimes we are, like you said, working with a 10,000-year-old mind. Today, you go into a grocery store, and that's exactly what you see people doing. There's more of a movement towards eating real food, but still there's all this food that's not real. And we have been conditioned to believe that this is food. And that in itself is changing our energies. That in itself affects us not only physically, where we're gaining weight, but it also impacts us emotionally and mentally. And I don't know if that's within your arena to talk about, but how our current lifestyles are just really, it's affecting us as human beings.
Yes, and you keep going back to the label, human being. And for me, I like to try to find words within a word in order for me to understand what that word may have been really trying to get at in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at human being, I break it down into humane, like learning to be humane, because we aren't animals. We've differentiated ourselves from being an animal that may not recognize humane, but even our animals are starting to recognize being humane with other animals. But yet human beings aren't recognizing how to be humane. And then there's being. Right now we are human doers.
Uh-huh.
And that's what's happened to us. The story is, you're a doctor, this is what you do. You're a nurse, this is what you do. You're a service provider picking up the trash, this is what you do. But that's not who you are. Who you are is who you are able to be. And so that's what I learned a long time ago with meditation. Because, especially when I spent 10 days in silence, in meditation, I learned how to see how my mind was operating and wanting to do all these things. And then it was up to me to figure out how I could be and then go be that in the moment that is there, and how can I be that humanely to help someone else. And that's just kind of how it fits for me when I start to look at what is it like to be a human being.
Ah, I love that. Someone told me a while ago, we need to learn how to be human beings instead of humans doing. And that's exactly what you brought. I know Ida must want to jump in here, too. I've got a couple of more questions for you. I've looked through your book, Yoga and Life and Empowerment. So I have a couple of questions from there. But, Ida, go ahead.
Okay. The question that I have is, in order for people to get to learn from you, do you host classes and things of that nature?
Yes, I actually, I owned yoga studios for 15 years, and my son has now taken over the yoga studio here in Towson, Maryland, and so he owns that now, and I travel around and teach a lot. I teach on the regular, on the weekends. If I am in town, I'll teach in D.C. I also teach here in Towson, and I'm all over. I've taught as far as Italy, Nicaragua, Canada. You name it. And so it got to a point for me that I really wanted to be able to touch as many lives as I could around the world, and so that's what I do now. I travel quite a bit to teach, and we also hold a lot of classes, and not asana classes. What I found was, as I taught yoga, I was only going to touch so many people, especially because coming from an athletic background, I teach a fairly vigorous yoga class. And then I learned how to teach a more gentle yoga class. And then still in the midst of teaching a vigorous class and a gentle class, there were so many people that I may never touch. And so then it began to be, that's what brought me full circle and began to really teach to meditation. And somehow it kind of clicked when I got to that place of being able to teach meditation. And then I started doing music. So we have concerts and things of that nature where anyone can come and they can feel that vibration. And then we teach life empowerment. And we have 3 phases of life empowerment to really help someone dive into understanding, okay, here's the operating system that you're in. Okay, there it is. Let's shift to the next phase of that. And then let's get to the 3rd phase where you can learn how to master yourself. And so, yes, I do teach quite often. And, someone can go to the website and find all the different events. We have hundreds of events on the website, and so we're, for me, I really, and my wife, we look to reach out and get to every community we can. So whenever we're asked, that's where we go.
Okay, that's good to know. And what is your website?
Someone can go to sidmcnary.com, or they can go to Nahi Wellness, NAHI Wellness.com. So either way, those portals will both get you there.
Oh, okay, awesome, because I'm definitely going to be checking out the Towson area because I understand about the energy and all that kind of thing, and I'm at a place now in my life where, because I do have a lot of things going on, it's become very, very important for me to make sure that I'm in alignment and in a peaceful manner, no matter what's happening.
Yes, understood.
Yes, indeed.
See that?
Wow.
In, Ida, that's really glad that you brought that in. One of the things that I was reading, and I just would like to have you expound on just a minute or two, is in your book, Yoga and Life Empowerment, in the very beginning, I believe it's your preface, you talk about how you came to more or less where you are through writing in your journals. There were two important things, the writing in your journals and your vision quest. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how those two, if you can't go on a vision quest, how can the writing in your journals actually help bring you into alignment? Because many people don't understand the power of the written word in their own lives. They see that as something that other people do, or their journal is about, it's different things for different people. But writing, getting down the bones, can you talk about the importance of that as a practice?
We'll start with the writing. For me, I began writing actually to overcome a statement made by a teacher. And that statement was that I would never be very strong at English. Coming from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, having an accent early on, and my parents being told I needed to be in a special class, this, that, and the other. And at one point, I just got to a place where I didn't want to believe it anymore. And so I actually had my sister write my paper, and I still got a C. And my sister would send articles into the Washington Post. I mean, she was a straight A student. So I was like, you don't really get it. You gave my sister a C. And so from that moment on, I wanted to begin to write in a way that I would remember what I wanted to say. And so that's kind of how it started for me. But then I continued to write, and what I began to learn about writing, and even because I'm also a painter, sell art and that kind of thing. And what I learned about writing was that, okay, we have a thought, and thoughts become things. Now, when I write, I just started making it actually be something. So I could write down, early on it was goals. I could write down goals, and if I let them go, they actually evolved into something else and became my goals. So I learned how to write in that way. Then I learned to just write and write about what had happened in my life. But what I noticed about writing about what happened in my life is I started to repeat those patterns. I started to see how my life was happening almost identical to the life I had, even if relationships have been a big growing space for me in my life. And so I used to write about my relationships and then wonder, how come I just got somebody new in my life, but I'm repeating the same relationship thing? And then I'd read about it, so then I burnt those books. And all of a sudden, I shifted that. And then I went into another stage in my evolution, and it became, and when you go through Yoga and Life Empowerment, we talk about at the end of each week, lessons as you go through, you have to do these journal questions, and then at the end of journal questions, you write 10 things that you're grateful for. And I learned to start to acknowledge what I was grateful for and watch those things appear in my life more and more and more. And so that's how the writing and journaling really showed up in my life, and how it evolved and how it continues to now when I write in a way to bring forward the greatness of my life. When someone reads the Warrior Within, it took me years to write that book. And what happened was, in the beginning, I was writing it from a place of all the problems I had in my life. The moment that my dad had to be a strong dad to get a bullheaded kid to move forward, I was holding on to that, and I held on to that with my dad for a long time until it became, oh, wait a minute. Actually, for every moment that I had negative, there's all these moments that I had great with my father. Even if that, and some people may say, well, my dad wasn't around. Well, maybe that's the greatness of your life. Because if he had been around, maybe it wouldn't have been, you wouldn't have had anything. And so that's what I learned, was how to really begin to construct in my mind how to move it in a place that was coming from a place of gratitude, that was bringing forward the gratitude, the great stuff, the full of greatness into my life in the future. So that's how journaling works for me. You know, I really put down concepts and let those concepts evolve on paper and then watch them show up in my life. So that's a big thing. And then with Vision Quest was just that. I mean, I went out 4 different times where you go and you sit for anywhere from 3 to 4 days and 2 to 3 nights without food or water, and it's a sacrifice that as a Native American we make in order to make that connection back to spirit. And you mentioned not everyone can do that, but that is something that we've started really bringing forward in the community that we hold. Once I've gotten to know somebody's moved through all the phases of life empowerment and they're really committed, because a lot of people's commitment kind of wavers at this point in time in the world. And once they're committed, then it's like, okay, now it's time for myself and to introduce people into the lineage of my elders, my grandmom, and so on and so forth, to help them go on Vision Quest, whether they're Native American or not. You know, in my opinion, we're all brothers and sisters, and you know, we all came from the first cell. The first cell divided of itself, split itself in half after taking everything negative out, and then gave to the other cell. And that's the nature of who we are. And so that's the space that I'm really evolving into, is to be able to hold that space for anyone to go on. And to honor my people, we actually call it Warrior Quest when I put people out coming from the warrior that I had to be to get here now.
Oh, thank you so much, Sid. Thank you.
Yes. Also, I was looking at your in the book Yoga and Life Empowerment, and one of the things, you have some steps in here of some of the things that you should do, and the one that really beamed out for me was write a letter to yourself as if it were 6 weeks in the future.
Yeah. And so what's amazing about that is you know, like, someone may read that on their own, and when they read it on their own, they may not believe it. So then they may write 15 things, let's say, and then only see 2 at the end of 6 weeks. And then they don't even recognize that maybe at the end of the year all 15 things happen, because they didn't have the belief system in the beginning. And so what I actually, at one point in my life, someone said, write yourself a letter 6 months from now, and now seal the letter, right? And we handed it in. 6 months from that day, they mailed me the letter, and I burst out in tears because it was so many things. Like, I didn't own a yoga studio at the time, but I wrote that. It was just like unconscious writing and from my subconscious that knew things were possible. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, everything was sitting in front of me. And even to the extent of somehow 6 months ahead, I knew I was going to be in turmoil with my wife. And shortly after that, she was gone from my life. And so that's the power of the pen. You know, when I love that saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. Mm-hmm. And I'm really a super fan of the Renaissance period. In the Renaissance period, where they wrote down the Bible, they did all those things. They wrote so precisely on what they wanted to see in the future. And then we're passing it around, especially in the name of like the Bible or the ancient text. We're passing it around, and we don't even realize we've actually manifested what they created and thought.
Wow. That is amazing.
I really appreciate you all having me on the show, because a lot of times we don't necessarily get this deep for their audience. So thank you all for the show that you have.
Oh,
this is absolutely eye-opening, and for not only myself, but I'm sure to our listeners. And before we wrap up, we need to make sure that we have your information for our listening audience so that they can get in touch with you.
Yes, so they can get in touch on our website. Again, it's Sid, S-I-D, McNary.com, McNairy.com, or NahiWellness.com, NaHI Wellness.com. So that's the easiest. They can email at programs@SidMcNary.com, and the phone number and everything else is on the website. So if they want to find us on Instagram, they can go to Nahi Wellness or Sid McNary on Instagram, as well as Facebook and Twitter as well. So those are the easiest ways to touch base now.
Okay, for somebody that wants to begin to practice yoga, your book, Yoga and Life Empowerment, is that designed for a beginner?
Yes, it sure is. So I like to look at yoga, most things I look at from a coach or an athlete's perspective. And doesn't mean you need to be an athlete, to just kind of the parameters that my mind sometimes goes. And so yoga is like playing baseball. You can get up to bat, and that's just the idea and the desire to play or to do yoga. If you hit the ball and you start to run to first base, you're in the game. So if you get to first base, you're still in the game. You get to second, third, you get all the way back to home. You just played the game. And so when we're in Yoga and Life Empowerment, we give someone all those steps with each posture. Whether it's, taking a warrior pose and then going into what we call side angle, taking a bind from there, moving into a bounded half moon, into bird of paradise, all those different things. The program is designed so someone, whether they are a beginner or have been practicing for 30 years, they can get into this practice and let it happen for them. That's the thing. I think one thing that's happened a lot in yoga practices is we've geared it so much for the teacher to have to lead that no one is actually doing the work for themselves. We all have to do the work. I can read you the Bible. It doesn't mean you're going to actually live out what the Bible says unless you do the work. And so that's kind of it. We really designed it, or I designed it in this way that allows people to open up to how it fits for them. And each day may be different. You may one day be going for a home run, and then the next day you're like, I drank too much coffee, which I don't drink coffee. I drank too much coffee, and now I need to back off on this other day. So that's really it. We designed it in a way that no matter where you are, you could practice 7 days a week.
Excellent. I just want to jump in there and ask, is there an age issue with this, or can anyone of any age? Anyone.
And, I once practiced next to a guy who was 92 years old. And in my mind, because I was early in my practice, he wasn't moving very much. I even had a guy come to take class that he had a chair the whole time, and he lifted his arms, opened his arms when everybody else did. He would straighten his legs and reach out to touch his toes when everybody else did, and things like that. So it really is open for everyone to do yoga. And if someone, I was there with the guy in the chair, the 92-year-old who didn't move much. After I looked at him and I realized he was a guy with a six-pack abs, his legs and everything was like chiseled to the bone at 92 years old. And he said all he does is move with the breath and feel each posture open without even moving. He just does it in his mind and how it affects his body. And so if someone is in that place, that the Yoga and Life Empowerment Program is also in a digital version, so someone can follow along with each week of the lessons of the asana practice, and that's right on our website. They can find the link to download all of that. And so we really made it that everyone can do it, and that's, you know, that's why we got into teaching the life empowerment portions that I've always, 2,000 plus teachers to going through training to become yoga teachers. I realized that there are a lot of people that don't want to be yoga teachers, but they wanted their lives to be in a masterful way. And so they can join us for just the mental parts of yoga. And, you know, that anyone, as long as they are able to use their mind in some capacity, they can be here. And from my view, if your mind can go there, everything else is possible too.
Wow. Wow. Sid, we're going to have to definitely have you again.
Yes.
This is just so powerful and so very deep, very, very deep.
Yeah. And I think our people are ready for it. People are actually hungering for the real things that actually will impact their lives. And like you said, and I think that's so important, if you want something, just the way you said about the Bible, you can read the Bible all you want to, but until you're willing to apply it, until you're willing to do the work, it's meaningless. And this is along the same lines. If you are willing to do the work, then you will have the benefits. I would love to be 92 and say that what I think about actually empowers me to such a point that my body, my mind, and my spirit is strong. That's awesome.
That is very awesome. That is very awesome. And then also, you think about the state of the world right now. It's in such a turmoil all across the globe, and just being able to walk around with peace is huge in the midst of war.
Yes, in the midst of war and chaos and insanity.
Yes.
We all know
well,
that.
You know, they say that the Buddha, his right-hand man, was at one point was a serial killer. And the Buddha was walking down the street, and the serial was coming to kill him. The serial killer was coming to kill him, and he had a belt full of ears of all the people he had killed that he would wear and take their ears. And the Buddha turned around because he felt his presence. And when he looked at him, the Buddha was full of so much peace that the devotee, that the guy that became his devotee, took off the belt of ears and laid it down and walked the rest of the life with the Buddha. And so if we are willing to be that level, to work on ourselves enough to be that present, then the world shifts to a new story. And I feel personally, you know, my personal journey with Jesus is very different than most. Sitting on the mountain and conversating with that presence and knowing that in his way, and all the sages, the Buddha, the sages before us, talked about the kingdom lies within each and every one of us. And who am I to deny those words? So that's been my journey, and to want to work on myself so much that I begin to affect my family. My family transforms and affects my community. My community goes on to impact the state touches the nation touches the world. And that's there for anybody. No matter who you are, that's your echo of your presence. So why not go into being that level that when you walk outside, a kid just says, I want to have that level of peace. And then they go touch the world. So it really is, if we're willing, that saying that kind of people say all the time, you have to be the change you want to see in the world. And so that's really it. If we let go of the old story, we'll see something new.
Very fine.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Sid. This has been very enlightening and powerful, and we are definitely going to have you again because there's a whole lot to talk about.
Yes, there's much
awesome.
More. Much more.
Well, I look forward to part 2.
Okay.
Oh, it's definitely going to be a part 2, and some workshops, some other collaborations. We're ready, and the people around us are ready.
Very much.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sid, so much for joining us, for giving us your time. I know our listening audience has benefited, and they're going to be looking forward to getting to know more about you and possibly showing up at your workshops. So get ready.
Yes,
awesome.
Absolutely.
I look forward to it.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
This show is brought to you by the amazing women of a Sister Circle Empowerment Network, ASCEN LLC, where we are never in competition, but always in collaboration, and our valued sponsors. Learn more about our sponsors and their services and membership in a Sister Circle, ASCEN LLC, at www.assistercircle.org. To learn about becoming a sponsor for Just Minding My Business Radio and how our marketing package benefits your company, please visit our website at www.assistercircle.org. Voiceovers by RCH VoiceWorks. Contact slvoiceworks8201@yahoo.com or call 443-620-4115.
Thank you for tuning in to Just Minding My Business Radio. I'm your host, Ida Crawford. We hope you enjoyed the show and appreciate you stopping by. Many blessings to you and yours.